Forget roses, candlelit vows, or romantic honeymoons. Medieval marriage wasn't about love. It was about land, power, survival, and control. Behind the tapestries and stone walls lay a world where unions were contracts, children were bargaining chips, and women had little say in their own futures. To truly understand the Middle Ages, you must step inside the marriages that shaped dynasties and crushed countless individual lives. Chapter 1. Marriage as a Transaction. When we imagine the medieval wedding, we might picture knights in shining armor pledging loyalty to ladies in flowing gowns. Reality, however, was starkly different. Marriage in the Middle Ages was less about love and more about economics, property, and family alliances. For nobles, marriage was a weapon of diplomacy. Kings married daughters to foreign princes to secure peace treaties. Dukes and counts brokered unions to expand their territories or gain dowries. A daughter wasn't just a child. She was currency, a bond cementing alliances between powerful houses. Sons, meanwhile, were matched carefully to secure heirs, bolster legitimacy, or strengthen claims to land.
Among peasants, the picture was humbler, but still transactional. A marriage bound families together in networks of obligation and support. Land, livestock, or even tools could form part of the bargain. Often, village elders or local lords played a role in approving matches, ensuring unions were practical for the community's survival. Consent, as we think of it today, was a slippery concept. The medieval church technically required the consent of both bride and groom, spoken aloud before witnesses. But in practice, consent was often coerced. A 14-year-old girl whose father demanded she wed a neighboring farmer rarely had room to refuse. A boy might be pressured into marriage to consolidate family wealth, whether he was ready or not. Even the age of marriage shocks modern sensibilities. Canon law allowed girls to marry at 12 and boys at 14, though consummation could be delayed until puberty. Among nobles, it wasn't unusual for marriages to be contracted when children were still toddlers, the actual union postponed until they were old enough. In peasant villages, practical needs often dictated timing. A family needed another pair of hands in the fields, or a dowry arrangement became ripe for settlement. Marriage, in short, was less a matter of two hearts entwined and more a cold calculation. How could this union strengthen family survival, wealth, or status? Romantic ideals existed, whispered in troubadour songs and courtly poetry, but for most medieval men and women, the reality was unyielding pragmatism. Chapter 2. Weddings, Rituals, and First Nights. Despite the transactional core, medieval marriages were wrapped in ritual, tradition, and spectacle. A noble wedding could rival coronations in grandeur. Ceremonies were public, designed to announce the alliance to all and leave no doubt about its legitimacy. Church involvement grew steadily throughout the Middle Ages. By the 12th century, marriage was firmly recognized as a sacrament, and weddings increasingly took place in or near churches. Priests officiated, witnesses gathered, and banns, public announcements of an intended marriage, were read aloud to give communities a chance to raise objections, such as existing betrothals or blood relations. Among peasants, ceremonies were simpler but still public. A wedding might take place at the church door, followed by a communal feast. Ale flowed, bread was shared, and music rang through the village green. In both noble and peasant contexts, marriage wasn't a private affair, but a community event. Society itself was a stakeholder in the bond. The bedding ceremony was one of the most striking customs. In noble households, newlyweds were often escorted to their marriage bed by relatives, clergy, or even the Lord himself. The union symbolically witnessed. Curtains drawn, candles burning, the expectation was clear. The marriage must be consummated, proving its legitimacy. Among peasants, this practice was less formal, but still common knowledge. The first night was everyone's business.
For brides, this first night could be terrifying. Many were young, inexperienced, and entering a world of duty rather than desire. For men, especially nobles, consummation was less about passion and more about producing heirs. A barren wife could mean annulment, scandal, or worse, political disaster. Weddings also codified the power imbalance of the sexes. A husband promised to protect, a wife to obey. Dowries often passed into the husband's control, and wives were legally absorbed into their husbands' households. Marital rape, though unnamed as such, was a reality of the era, as conjugal rights were seen as absolute. Yet, weddings also provided rare moments of joy. For peasants, the celebration could be the highlight of the year, a break from toil, a feast shared with neighbors. For nobles, a wedding could dazzle courts with pageantry, minstrels, and banquets. Behind the solemn vows and economic calculations, people still found ways to celebrate, laugh, and hope, even if love itself was rarely the centerpiece.
Chapter 3. Life inside a medieval marriage.
Once the vows were said and the feasting done, the true test began: the daily grind of married life. For women, the burden was immense. A wife was expected to bear children, manage the household, and support her husband's work. Noble women oversaw estates in their husband's absence, managing servants, finances, and agricultural output. Peasant wives labored alongside husbands in the fields, cooked meals over open fires, and nursed endless streams of children. Childbearing defined much of a medieval woman's life. With high infant mortality rates, women bore child after child, often risking their own lives in the process. A noble woman might die in childbirth before the age of 25, replaced by a new bride to secure heirs. Peasant women faced similar risks, with far fewer resources for care. Motherhood was constant, dangerous, and all-consuming. For men, marriage brought its own set of obligations. A husband was expected to provide for his household, defend it, and maintain his wife's honor. Among nobles, this meant protecting dynastic claims, waging wars, or securing alliances. Among peasants, it meant unrelenting labor to keep food on the table.
Conflict, however, was common. Domestic violence was widespread and often socially tolerated, though excessive cruelty could draw community or church intervention. Adultery was harshly punished for women, sometimes fatally, while men's infidelity was often overlooked unless it disrupted inheritance. Divorce, as we understand it, was nearly impossible, though annulments could be sought through the church under specific circumstances, such as consanguinity, being too closely related, or impotence. The church loomed over married life. It preached fidelity, condemned fornication, and enforced rules about kinship. Cousin marriages were forbidden, though these laws were bent for political convenience. The church also preached the ideal of marriage as a spiritual union, but in practice, the lines between sacred duty and brutal reality were blurred. For many, marriage was simply survival, an arrangement that allowed households to function, children to be born, and land to be tilled. Romance existed, but it was often found outside marriage, in courtly love traditions, poetry, or illicit affairs. Inside the marriage bond, duty almost always overshadowed desire.
Chapter 4. Legacies and Lessons.
By the end of the Middle Ages, the institution of marriage had hardened into the bedrock of European society. It was at once sacred and practical, oppressive and necessary. Its contradictions reveal much about the world of the time. Marriage preserved dynasties and created kingdoms, The union of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile in 1469 reshaped Spain and set the stage for global exploration. Earlier, countless marriages among nobility had determined the shifting boundaries of England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire. Each bride and groom was more than a person. They were a political tool. For peasants, marriage was less about shaping kingdoms and more about shaping survival. A farm without a wife was incomplete. A household without children, precarious. Marriages ensured community continuity, embedding individuals into webs of obligation and reciprocity. The echoes of medieval marriage still linger today. The Church's insistence on mutual consent, however imperfectly enforced, laid the foundation for modern concepts of marital choice. The rituals, rings, and vows we recognize today trace their lineage to medieval ceremonies. Yet so too do the darker legacies: patriarchy cemented in law, property rights skewed against women, and the expectation of female obedience.
Looking back, medieval marriage forces us to confront the realities beneath the myths. It wasn't all romance and gallantry. It was a hard, often unfair institution that shaped the lives of millions in profound ways. And yet, amid the control and calculation, real human stories emerged. Moments of tenderness, resilience, laughter, and even love that defied the rigid framework. The hidden truth is this: medieval marriage was never a singular experience. It was a spectrum, ranging from the gilded halls of royalty to the mud floors of peasant cottages. Some unions were hellish cages, others quiet havens of companionship. Together, they reveal the raw humanity of an age so often wrapped in legend.